Do you get demotivated by bad clients? Yep, happens to all of us. In this video, I'm going to give you 5 practical tips of what to do next time you face this scenario so that you can set yourself apart from the rest of the freelancers who get demotivated, they stop working, or their efficiency goes down, and instead you can put yourself in that elite 10% category who can bounce back immediately in this scenario. So I understand, it happens to all of us, and there's many reasons for it. The client is either too picky, maybe they're too cheap, they leave a bad review, or you thought you got the job and all of a sudden you find out they gave it to someone else last minute after they promised you and confirmed with you and they set up the contract with you. It happens. It's part of the game, it's part of the process, but what do we do in this scenario and how do you move from there? The first point over here is that you should screen clients. Now, what do I mean by that? You should develop your own check system that you have for yourself so that when you get a potential client, you can run them through there. So for example, myself, when I speak to a client, I have a few things in my mind that are going as I'm speaking to them, and I try to see how many boxes to check off. For example, first thing that I want to see, are they someone who's easygoing or are they someone who's very specific and picky? Because I know that if I get stuck in revisions and things like that, that it's going to be more costly than what I thought. Number 2, what is the scope of the project? Is the scope of the project very defined, specific, or is it more vague where you have to kind of find where you are? The problem that I noticed with the vague projects is that there's a lot of room for, hey, you know what, well, I thought this was part of your job. Could you also do this as well? Whereas the specific ones, they're very specific. You know how to get in and you know how to get out from there as well. The third point is that I try to find out in terms of their budget, are they very flexible or are they very specific? The reason being is that I avoid clients who have very specific tight budgets just because there's no room for flexibility. A situation may come up tomorrow, maybe you notice that there's something else with the project that needs to be done, and they're going to be like, well, you know what, I don't have the money for it, can you do it in the same price? Or you may agree on the project and all of a sudden they say, it's supposed to be 10 hours a week for 6 months, and it turns out to, well, you know what, the next few weeks budget's kind of low, I want to maybe make it down to 5 hours a week, and you're sort of have to recalculate your expenses. So right from the get-go, as I'm speaking to them, I try to figure out these points. So do they fall into the ideal client category, the sort of, I have to work with the category, or the client, I don't want to work with them because I don't want to deal with the headache. So that's number 1 over there, because if I filter out those people who are the bad clients, and even in situations where they may give more money, but I filter them out, I reduce the headache and the likelihood of me getting demotivated running into a bad scenario. Demotivation usually happens after a bad interaction with the client. Now, most of the reasons of those bad interactions, what I've noticed with clients, is miscommunication. And the fact that you think that, this should have been done this way and the client felt this way. And there's this sort of miscommunication of what they thought versus what you thought. You're all online the same page, but again, certain things come up. So it's always best in writing to clear everything in advance. What is your expectation in terms of project? What is the deadline? The number of revisions? How soon should they get back to you? You don't want it to be that they're giving, you agree on a certain amount of revisions to have, and once you give the work to them, you're very fast, but it turns out the client needs 5 days to get back to you. So writing everything out in advance and being very specific with it, avoid situations where you're going to have a bad experience because the client has agreed to that in advance and you've also agreed to that as well. And you set those parameters in advance. Get them to write out what their expectations from you are as well. And this is very important because it's great to have a general verbal conversation, but if the client is specific in what they want, that also gives you a guideline of what to follow as well. So there's no miscommunication in terms of, well, you thought this was needed, whereas the client expected something else. Sometimes what I notice is that the job description that you apply to is not very specific or is missing certain parts. And then what ends up happening is that those are discussed during the time of the interview. And those could be verbal discussions and something can get lost. Therefore, it's very important for the client to write out specifically in case there's anything missing. And then you also have something to work towards in terms of from the client's perspective. And the 4th point over here, and just to kind of gauge yourself and see if you're on the right track or not, is go through your list. Look at the past 10 clients. How many of those were bad experiences? If it was like 1, it's just part of the process. Leave it, move on from there, and that's that. It's okay. And you can't control it, and you'll never have 100% perfect experiences. However, if it's 3 or 4 or 5 or anything more than that, that's where you need to have a serious conversation with yourself and try to figure out like where do you stand? Where are you going wrong, right? Is it a matter of you're not putting enough emphasis on the communication in the beginning. If it's something else, you really need to figure that out then, right? But one or two, I wouldn't even stress about it. And the last point over here that I want to emphasize is that sometimes, even though you may only experience 2 bad clients out of 10, it may just be that those 2 bad clients are so demotivating that they take the life out of you. And in that scenario, rather than forcing yourself, take a step back. Take some time off from Upwork though. Remember, the beauty of Upwork is the fact that it's not a full-time job where you have to show up every single day. You could finish a contract up and say, I want to take two weeks off, and that's that though, and you're perfectly fine. So use that flexibility to your advantage. Just take a step back when needed to revitalize yourself and get back into the game. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like what you see, give it a thumbs up. If you have a question that you want me to answer, leave it in the comment section below. Subscribe to our channel, and I look forward to seeing you guys again.